Alright guys, welcome to this video. I've been itching to make this video because I'm excited to compare what could potentially be the best gimbal setup for any type of point of view, POV, running, cycling, mountain biking, whatever you want. So in this video I'm going to try to show you what I use to get this type of footage as I'm running. And you can see this is the Santa Monica Classic. It's the gimbal, the EVO ESS with the GoPro Hero 5 session, and but I think I have a new, lighter, better solution for you guys. So in this video I'm excited to show you and compare this footage that I used to get compared to the new one in the systems that I use. So let's get started. So here is the beginning of my system. So I found this to be the best Chesty to mount my system. So this is the Stuntman Chesty. It's made out of a tough plastic. You can see it's bendable, it's durable. I've used this for a couple of years now. It's easy to put on. There's a rough part right here in the front, but I'll show you why that is. Let's put that aside for now. Here is the old setup that I used. This is the housing for the Hero Session 5. Here's the camera. This is the camera that I used to get that footage of running Hero Session 5, and this is the gimbal setup. So as you can see, this is the EVO SS, and on the side, in order to balance the gimbal part of it, I have a penny, and then I use 3M tape onto a washer, and then 3M tape onto the gimbal. And here I have a front weight, another piece of metal with 3M tape taped around the front, so that this, otherwise the camera would the weight of it would point straight up, and that stresses the motors. So I found this to be the best setup. And in order to replace the batteries, you guys probably know this, but you loosen that wire, remove the housing, put it back on, and there you go. So this is the gimbal setup that I was using. So let's put the GoPro in here and show you guys how it all worked out. Here's the Session 5. Oh, before we put it in there, guys, let me remove the door, because the door itself adds a little more weight than I want, and it throws the balance. So let's put it in there, let's lock it in place and see. Let's spin this around, and there you go. This is my setup here. This is the gimbal. Let's see if it balances. There you go. Perfect. Perfect balance with the weights, the way I found this to work. Alright, so let's put that aside, and let's show you how that setup was mounted onto the Stuntman. So first, with the Stuntman, you get this junction tightener that goes right on the ball joint, and then this is it came with the Stuntman. It goes on the other side, and that will screw on to the bottom of the gimbal, the EVO SS gimbal. So let's loosely tighten this so that it's in place, and then we'll screw on the gimbal here. There's the thread on the bottom, so let's tighten that onto there. There we go. Not super tight, just tight enough, and there we go. So now you want this to be as close to your body as possible, so that the weight of the gimbal and the camera are not wanting to hang forward. So let me position this in the right way. Camera facing forward, balanced, and the joint. And if we push this as far back as we can, you can see there's a problem already. The gimbal hits the top of the Chesty, even if you push it all the way back, in order to have the center of mass be as close to your body as possible. So what I did is I cut this little wedge here as part of a foam packing material, and I put 3M tape, and that is why that little part of the Stuntman Chesty is a little bit sticky, because this goes on there, and I found that this was the best way to give me just enough space. Even if I push the gimbal all the way back as close to the Chesty, that's enough of a space to clear the top of the Chesty. As you guys can see here, it doesn't hit anymore. The gimbal is free to spin around if it needs to. So now let's tighten that. There you go. It's still a little bit loose here. as you can see. Let's tighten it up a little more, loosen it, push it back, tighten it, and let's set this back, because what I found, this is a little bungee cord that was longer than this, but I cut it to length, and this is now what I use to go right from one side of the chesty to the other. Because what I noticed is that if this bungee cord wasn't there to hold the gimbal back, the whole system back onto the chesty, it would flex forward, and after a while it would be looking down. So this, as you can see, it's tough. It'll scratch up the chesty a little bit, but the plastic is tough. So now the gimbal and the GoPro and everything is pushed back, and it won't fall forward no matter how much forward force is applied when I'm running, and the gimbal is now clearing the top of the chesty. So this is the setup that I was using to record running footage point of view. There we go. Now what I did notice when I was testing all this out is that the gimbal will last about 4 hours, 4 plus, maybe 4 hours and 10 minutes, 4 hours and 15 minutes. I was running a half marathon out in on my own at the beach, and after I ran the 13.1 miles, I kept jiggling the gimbal by hand so that it would simulate the running motion. And after about 4 hours total and 15 minutes, the gimbal died. The battery died. So I knew that the gimbal battery lasts enough to run about even maybe a full marathon. Maybe that's pushing it, depending on how fast you are. But for a half marathon, for me, the gimbal battery was above and beyond. I would not need the spare batteries for the gimbal. So that eliminated having to carry these batteries when I'm running. However, I did get this very thin tape. It's a USB-C wire essentially, but it's flat, super thin, paper tape thin. And at the very end, I bought this 90-degree elbow, USB-C elbow, and on the other end it's a USB connector, and it has a shrink tubing on either end. It's clear, and this would keep everything secure and, to the best that it can, waterproof. And so as I was running, the gimbal, the GoPro though, would only last about 7 miles, so about 70, 80 minutes. So then I bought this very thin battery. It's an Anchor battery. I'll show you the description right here. And it's thin so that it's low profile, so I can keep it in my running pouch around my waist without bulking up too much. So this end goes right in here, and as I was running around 7 miles, I would then pull the wire out of my waist pack and connect it on the side of the GoPro, because the GoPro needed the additional battery power to carry me through recording the rest of the half marathon. So as I was running and the camera's doing its thing, I would just hold it for a second, plug in the USB connector with the 90-degree elbow, and make sure the battery was on, and it would charge the GoPro as I was running for the rest of the race. As you can imagine, the problem here is that if you get a thick wire, it's going to interfere with the gimbal motors, the balancing that's going on. So that's why I got the paper thin tape USB-C wire. As you can see with this connection, once you push it in, it barely clears the housing of the GoPro. It doesn't quite touch, but it barely clears. So that was enough of clearance that I needed, and this would keep the GoPro recording for the rest of the half marathon. So now the wire, what to do with the wire? You don't want it to dangle, because it might get caught in your hands as you're running, or something else. Maybe you pull out your water bottle and you catch the wire. So what I would do, let me turn this on right here. What I would do is tuck the tape wire right behind the chesty, between my body and the chesty, and give it enough slack so that as you're running, that part of the cable at least is anchored partially between my body and the chesty, and it's enough slack that it doesn't interfere with the gimbal motors. So maybe right about there is where I would have, that's enough slack that the gimbal can still do what it needs to do and the GoPro's getting enough power. So this was the setup that I was using before, guys, and it worked really, really well. But along comes the Osmo Pocket. Let me just get this out of here, start from scratch, and I'll show you the new setup. Here's the Osmo, and here is the Osmo Grip. Now this is the official attachment by DJI that goes along with the Osmo. And here's a little socket joint that came along with the Chesty, so you can mount GoPro type connectors. So this goes on this side just like the other one, and this goes on the ball joint of the Chesty, and we'll loosely tighten that. And now let's connect the DJI Osmo Pocket GoPro connector grip. Let's get the screw on there, and we'll loosely tighten that in there because we're going to set up here. And now let's see, let's find the right. So with all these joints you can really play around with the positioning, forward, backward, left, right. It even has a little bit of a circular range of motion. But for our purposes, we want this to be back as much as possible, close to our bodies. And let's see, that's as close as we're going to get there. So let's tighten that. Let's put in the Osmo in here so I can show you the angles that we're working with. Let's take off this little case part and open that. Slip the Osmo right into the grip, and the screen is above that the top part of the grip, and the buttons are exposed right through the middle. And let's grip it in the back. Let's show you here, and pull the tab down, and now it's locked in place. So now the Osmo is in the grip. So as you can see, if we put the Osmo, if we try to make the Osmo vertical, it's still not, there's a little gap between the Chesty and the Osmo. So I made this little foam with that same material as I did with the other one, and I wedged it right behind that pivoting point. And now when I push the Osmo back and tighten the knob as much as I can, you can see that everything is now secure, and the Osmo can be pivoted to be in the vertical position. Now remember, the problem I had with the other gimbal setup is that the gimbal was heavy enough that with the running forward motion, the up and down, it would lever the gimbal forward. So I'm going to use the same bungee that I was using with the other setup, run it right behind the joint. This way it pulls everything close to the Chesty and prevents any of this system from beginning to lean forward as I'm running. There we go. So now you can see it doesn't put any pressure on the Osmo Pocket itself. It's only on the plastic and on the joint, and that'll stabilize the Osmo completely. And so let's turn it on here. You can see how it looks. When you turn on the Osmo, it's going to look forward, meaning towards the runner in this case. So if you triple click the button, it'll turn around the camera. Let's do that. And now it's looking forward. So as you're running, it'll record forward, and it'll keep everything balanced perfectly. As you can see the motion here. And if you press twice, it'll recenter. So let's say you're running and you look down and the gimbal's not quite centered. Press that button twice as you're running and it'll recenter. So now, from my testing, I've noticed that the gimbal, the Osmo Pocket, will also record about 7 miles before you need to juice it up. So we're going to use the same battery as we did before, since we already have it. It's slim, we know it works, but now we can use any USB-C cable to charge the Osmo, because the charging point of the camera, of the entire system, is on the bottom, so it doesn't interfere at all with the motion of the gimbal, with the motors. So as I'm running, when I get to mile 7, I can just plug this in the bottom, and it'll, as you can see, it'll start charging the Osmo Pocket, so you can finish recording the entire race without running out of power. And it doesn't interfere with the gimbal because the attachment again is on the bottom. So this is my new system, guys, that I'm using. So now let's compare the footage between the DJI Osmo Pocket and the GoPro with the EVO SS. Here we have a little bit of footage from the Santa Monica Classic that I ran in 2018. And there it is, the Santa Monica Classic, 6.2 miles, very, very nice race, very overcast that day. Footage was captured in 1080p at 60 frames a second. I find that to give you the best possible viewing footage. Let me fast forward here and see it in action. So there I am, guys, running the Santa Monica Classic with the GoPro along with the EVO SS setup. As you can see, I'm running. I'm not sprinting, I'm running, and then I'm walking here. I do run walking intervals. So let's fast forward to another running part. Here it is. I'm running, so as you can see, this is pretty good. It's watchable, it's enjoyable. If you're into running and you like watching other people run, this is really, really good footage. So now let's compare with the Osmo Pocket. This is part of the footage that I ran around the Rose Bowl on my own, and as you can see, it's also in 1080p 60 frames a second. I did boost the color up a little bit on this footage so it looks a little more, the colors pop a little more, but here it is. So there it is running. It's still pretty stable. This is the Osmo Pocket. So now, yeah, there's a guy running there. It's viewable. It's pretty good. Now let's compare them side by side. Let's see here. On the left you have the Osmo Pocket. On the right you have the GoPro with the EVO SS. Now the color quality is different, but we're not really paying attention to that. The one on the right was overcast, the one on the left was sunny, and I popped the colors a little bit on both. But really, it's more the stabilization that we're after. Here, I'm running in both, and you can see it's pretty equal. Let me fast forward this one too. Now, the wide view of the GoPro might give you more to see compared to the Osmo, but overall, they're very, very equal, guys, to the point where I'm going more with the Osmo Pocket for me because it's just a slimmer type setup, lighter as well. Now here I'm going to add a little bit of smooth cam to the Osmo Pocket footage. This is the same footage you just saw. The colors that pop here are without stabilizations, and the colors that are more flat are with the smooth cam. Let me scroll up here and show you guys that the top layer, let me click on the top video. The top video has a layer of stabilization clicked on with smooth cam. There we go. So now let's compare the same footage with smooth cam and without. So here is the Osmo Pocket with a little bit of color pop, raw footage. Looks really, really good. And now we're going to enter the smooth cam right there. Does it really? Now back. No smooth, now smooth. Does it? No smooth, now smooth. Maybe it makes most minimal of differences of improvement. It's hard to really say. Maybe a little bit. Let's watch it over again. Smooth, normal, smooth, normal, smooth. Maybe a little bit improvement, but overall I'm sticking with the Osmo Pocket for my point of view runs and any activities. Here's the setup right after I finished running that Rose Bowl run. As you can see, everything is pretty stable, rock solid. This is what it looks like. So there you go, guys. Let me know, what do you think? Are you going to be switching over to the Osmo Pocket for any POV activities? Like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. See you on the next one.